Okay, I'm Daryl Montgomery. Basically, I'm a macro strategist. I have a very extensive resume, and you can look it up on LinkedIn. I used to be a professor, so technically, I'm Professor Montgomery. And this is a talk on globalization, basically, or more correctly, de-globalization, which is what's happened. And globalization probably peaked somewhere between 2008 and 2011. And people didn't notice it, they haven't noticed it yet. And the deglobalization is actually increasing. And like almost everything else in the world, it's globalization cyclical. And it did not begin in 1986, which most people think. It began around the third millennium BC. So it is a long, long, long history. So what we've seen recently is not typical, and it's basically the end part of an up movement. And we're now entering the down part of that movement. And global bifurcation, this is a special case of deglobalization. The world is splitting into two parts of semi-autonomous blocks of countries. And this indicates a power shift is taking place.
Daryl, I'm gonna ask you to move a couple of centimeters closer, so that way you're gonna set it perfect, right there.
Okay, so this is global bifurcation. It's the next phase of globalization. Let's go.
Is that
Okay, this is the talk. We're going to say what is global bifurcation, since no one's ever heard this term. We're going to do a comparison of the collective West and the collective East. These are the two blocks of countries. We're going to then say how bifurcation fits in with globalization, the bigger movements, and the key developments that are taking place, and then what's the outcome or the likely outcome. Okay, we've already said two semi-autonomous blocks, the collective West, collective East. The collective West is the US, Canada, UK, the EU, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea. It really crosses the globe. This is just a convenient name. The collective East is Latin America, that's Central and South America, Africa, and the rest of Asia without Japan or South Korea. Now, the Russo-Ukrainian War has been a catalyst that is expediting this movement. As I said, globalization probably peaked several years ago. So, but this is making it faster. And what's causing or expediting it right now is all these sanction policies of the EU and the G7. And most people don't realize the EU has sanctioned Russia 81 times since 2014. It did not start with the war. It had already sanctioned Russia 72 times before the war began. And each one of these sanctions is deglobalizing. And the US is now sanctioning China with chips. So a whole new sanctioning strategy has started. This is also deglobalizing. And most people also don't realize the EU and US sanctioned over 30 countries. It did not start with Russia. And China are simply the latest examples. And the UK by itself, about 25 countries. So all of this is deglobalizing, and it's just expanded and mushroomed.
There was a big political question where the U.S. was trying to get backing for supporting Ukraine, and some leader from Africa said, we've been colonized by the West, and Russia's never done anything bad to us. Why should we join the U.S. now, right?
So we're getting to that.
Yep. Okay.
And we can also think of that. You move this up. This is there was a big decolonization movement from the European countries. 1945, 1960, most of Africa and in fact, almost all of Africa and a large part of Asia were colonized and got independence. And South America went through this process in the 19th century, right after the United States. So this is, they're not fully separate from the European colonial masters. This is like the last stage. They still have had the European countries significant effect. And when they sanctioned Ukraine, they said, just like Marty just said, to all these countries, well, we did it. Why shouldn't you? You're supposed to follow us and do what we tell you. Well, these countries do not want to do that anymore. They've had it. So, and you will see in the press, and if you read foreign policy publications, of that we're entering a multipolar world. It's not true. We're entering, and I hate to use this word, a bipolar world. So I don't want to imply it's mentally ill. So, and multipolar is unstable. So, and we're missing like about 7 chapters of the history of globalization, which shows that this would be very unstable. So this is dealt in the book I'm writing about
I
this.
just want to make one small note. Even though Africa is decolonized, there's something called the African franc, which is the France holds the gold reserves of 7 or 15 countries of Africa in Paris, and it allows them to get a lot of policy passed because of it. So,
Well, lots of luck in that contention. It's not going. So here's the map. Yellow is the collective West. Blue or gray is the collective East. And we will notice the collective West is a very small part of the world. Okay, next one. And here's the 2 comparisons. We look further down. The collective West has 12% of the world's population. The East, 88%. So you'll see, like in publications and news articles, you know, nobody is with Russia. We're all opposed to it. That all is 12% of the world's population. It does not include the other 88%. And the other 88% sort of disagrees with this. So the comparison of the 2 blocks, the West is post-industrialized. The East is industrializing. The future is low GDP growth in the West, high GDP growth in the East. The West are commodity importers net. The collective East are commodity exporters, and they possess huge differential part of the world's commodities. So this is quite important. The West follows a green agenda. The East does not and is not likely to. And there's something called modernity and traditionalism. Modernity doesn't mean you have a refrigerator and a computer. It's a viewpoint, like a very progressive viewpoint, where traditionalism is the way things have, usually been in countries throughout history.
Can you spend a couple of seconds talking about post-industrialized? Because I mean, we're finding out right now because of this Ukraine war that Europe is all out of weaponry. The United States is slow to build up new weaponry to export. I mean, can you talk about that supply chain?
A very good point. In the World War II, the US revved up, was the biggest industrial power on earth, and it managed to rev up that industrial base and produce a huge amount of weapons very quickly. And that's really what won the war. And we sent those weapons to other allied countries. We do not have that industrialized base anymore. We cannot do this now. China has that industrialized base and can do it. So we should be very careful about trying to punch China in the face over and over again. Even Russia has a better industrialized base. They have nationalized their entire weapons production system, which is far more organized in the United States. And this could be another half-hour talk.
We're not going to take half an hour.
Yeah, no, I know. Wait, another key point is aging demographics. The West is old, and the oldest country on earth is Japan, and the average age is close to 50. That may not sound really old, but it's ancient in average demographic terms. And all of the top 30 countries after Japan, with one exception, are in Europe. So the West is old, the East is very young. And if you talk to an economist, say a demographic economist, say, well, where are you going to have future growth? They're going to tell you, well, the country with all the young people is going to have the future growth, not the country with all the old people. So there's a very clear split age-wise. And then the 2 major organizations that hold the collective West together, the EU and NATO. And in the collective East, it's going to be the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and OPEC Plus. And there's other smaller groups, but those are the biggest.
Next.
Okay, hurry. We only have.
Oh, we have a question? Was there a question?
So how entrenched is OPEC on the east side versus us?
It's all on the east.
Firmly entrenched.
What we're gonna see in this, in the
What
second,
we're talking
there's
about?
a
OPEC
match.
plus.
There's actually, yes, OPEC Plus, not just OPEC.
Yeah.
Which one is this? This is the BRICS. Okay, the BRICS was originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then they added South Africa. There's about 20 other countries that want to join right now. And if you see, it's sort of filling in this collective East bloc.
Including Mexico, right?
Yeah, yes, it's anything in the light purple. And people in these countries are knocking down the door. I want to join the BRICS.
And Argentina wants to join, and it has just started its own currency trade zone with Brazil, correct? Like they're doing some kind of that.
This is yes, this is another issue. The de-dollarization is part of this whole process. So we need two more members.
Yep.
So that's the BRICS. We'll get to, this is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's mostly a pan-Asian organization, with Egypt and then a tinge of Turkey. So it's almost all of Asia is part of this organization. And next, the key. And this is OPEC Plus. You see, it's like a large part of Africa, the Middle East, Russia, and even Mexico.
So what's the difference between the blue and the dark blue? I don't see
the
key.
The dark blue is OPEC.
Got it.
The light blue is the plus.
Yep.
And this, the OPEC Plus was created in 2016. This controls a majority of the world's oil exports, a significant majority.
Shouldn't be the United States would be non-OPEC on your map.
Oh, it is non-OPEC, yes. Now, the United States is the biggest oil producer in the world.
But it's non-OPEC.
Yes, but we're also the biggest oil consumer in the world. We are net short about 8 million barrels per day. So we better be importing that from somewhere.
Well, I mean,
the lights are going.
The capacity for oil is dramatic in the Americas. But anyway, continue.
Okay, we have to keep going. Okay, how does this fit in with globalization? And here's the explanation of globalization: the trend toward economic, financial, transportation, communication, technology, and trade integration. And trade is the key, and that's in the very broadest sense, in most or even all parts of the known world. Only after the 1600s, it was the whole world that we know of today, known. So prior to that, you had globalization of the known world. So it still existed. Now, how extensive it is based on technology, of transportation and communication. And politics determines what's happening. Politics is what's crashing right now. So, and trade, as you can think of it, it's a supranational political organization, as opposed to an individual country. It's a whole group of countries agreeing to certain terms. And, that involves trade routes, financial transfers, which are very important, and, mutually agreed upon rules and regulations that are not supposed to be violated, but they have been by the West repeatedly. So, and as I said, globalization began in the third millennium BC, around 2500 BC or so, and with the three great civilizations of that era. And there's history, like the stock market, it expands, it contracts, and almost always in the contraction, there's a power realignment. Sometimes during expansions, it can be also. So, and as I said, a bifurcation indicates a power exchange between two parts of the world. One is losing, one is gaining.
And so your demographic quote was that the global East has 12% of the population, but at the end of World War II.
No, that's the global West.
Sorry, the global West. But at the end of World War II, it's closer to 50%. Is that right?
I don't think so. No. People were always in the East.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So
So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, the G7 convened in Tokyo. And we find out that,
Hiroshima.
huh?
Hiroshima.
You believe that? They had to pick Hiroshima.
I believe it. I'm incredulous, but otherwise.
Everything's a
we
symbol
find
of
out-
something.
We
Yes,
find out
yes.
that the GDP of the BRICS countries collective is greater than the GDP of the G7, who are imposing sanction on Europe because they are laden with debt and they are a mess in running their countries in the G7. Where is this formula going with the G7? Are they going to come back to planet Earth and accept reality that we all should be more communicative than confrontational?
Oh, and by the way, debt is part of GDP.
Yeah. Well, short answer is no. It's not going to happen. Now,
That's why you are my favorite
I
speaker.
only have 30 minutes for a 3-hour talk. And I will stay later at lunch. Anyone who has any questions,
We're grabbing you for lunch.
ask
Go
a
ahead.
million questions. So, and maybe we'll have a few minutes late. So we're key developments. Okay, what has been going on? The because of all these sanctions, there's been development of internalized trade routes within the collective East to avoid the West and their sanctions. And those include the Arctic NSO, that's a North Sea route in Russia that has been opened up for shipping, and the shipping has grown very rapidly, very quickly. And there's something called the Persian Corridor 2.0. This goes through Iran to go to the Indian Ocean to avoid the Suez Canal and the Mediterranean. And then there's a whole series of pipelines, and the famous ones are the Power of Siberia pipelines 1 and 2. And this takes natural gas and oil from Russia into Asia. And the whole pipeline system previously was geared toward going to Europe. That is gone. These sanctions on Russia that has said, we're not going to buy your energy, we're not going to buy your natural gas. Well, Russia said, okay, you're never getting it ever again. So it wasn't a 1 year. I think the Europeans said, oh, it'll be 1 year, and they were going to get it. They thought they were actually going to get it cheap. And that did not happen. And they're not going to get it at all. And so what happened, well, maybe we'll do that in the next slide. All that cheap energy is going to Asia. And so the two of the fastest growing economies in the world are in India and China this year. And India is number 1. And it went from Russia was a non-existent source to it went to its number 1 source. And that came out of
and natural gas.
Oil,
Yeah, right,
oil
right,
specific. And that came out of
India
Europe.
might be natural gas demand.
Right, so India, right, so
Exposure.
India has bought Russian oil at a phenomenally low
In
discount.
rupees.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
rupees.
In rupees.
And so does China. Yes,
Even
well,
though-
they got the cheap Russian oil and gas, and Germany's went into recession, and India is the number 1 growth economy in the world. It's not coincidental. They are directly related. So Europeans' policies are destroying their own economy, and not just this for this year, but for the future.
And much of European industry is value add, industrial growth where they process things and they need energy to process it. So might have been a bad mistake.
Well, it's even
And they
worse.
need the minerals also,
Yes.
which they do not have.
It's even worse than that. Petrochemical stocks are needed for chemical industry. They're an input product. You don't just need them to run the energy. And 10% of Germany's economy is the chemical industry. And that is moving to America, actually. So part of the collective West can benefit because we have cheap natural gas.
You know,
We've got about 5 minutes left, so why don't we?
We have, hold on, we're not done. The East has disconnected, and this is really, really important, from the Western control of finance systems. Now, the West made this happen. The East didn't just say, hey, we're going to do it. So Russia has replaced SWIFT, which is the bank messaging, global bank messaging system, with a system called SPFS. And MER and NSPK are their credit card systems, which replaced Visa and MasterCard. And China created at the same time, this is between 2014 and 2022, a system called SIPS, which replaced CHIPS. And this is actual money transfer systems. And for credit cards, they have Union Pay, which has processes as much money, I think, as Visa does, or Visa and MasterCard. So alternative financial systems have been created, and Russia and China merging SPFS and SIPS, so they are a total alternative financial system, which means they don't have to use SWIFT, they don't have to use chips controlled by the West.
And unless on a smaller scale, Iran has also rolled out its own version of SWIFT, it's now agreed to do transactions with India and Pakistan with.
Yeah, there's a number of small, so they're all going to be
We
integrated
use it in Dubai also.
into this
For the
bigger.
last 2 years.
The Iran SWIFT?
Yeah, because we have a large Iranian community.
Of course, yeah, sure.
But they're small systems, they'll be integrated into the bigger system.
Just as an aside, this is really a triumph of mercantilism over politics, right? So let's continue. Next,
Okay, wait,
I'm gonna push it out there, yeah, and it'll also be distributed.
wait, we have one more, but we'll go back. We're getting ahead. Now, there's also, so the key point of these alternative financial systems, this allows the East to dump the US dollar. They could not do it before without an alternative financial system. They now have that. So you are going to see de-dollarization, and it's going to accelerate. So, and this will destroy the dollar as the reserve currency. It will remain a reserve currency in the collective West, It will not be used in the collective east.
And last year was about 80% of all transactions globally were in US dollar.
I don't think it was that
Was that
much.
high?
But anyway, there's also alternative financing with, this is the new development bank, this is the BRICS, the NDB, and the AAIB in China and the SCO development bank. They do not have to go to the IMF and World Bank to finance projects anymore. So there's also removes these from the West. Okay, what's the outcome? As I just said, de-dollarization. This is a very critical point. It's very, very important because having the reserve currency lowers the inflation rate in the United States tremendously. And when England lost its reserve currency as the pound, you saw an uptick in inflation, and now its inflation is always much higher than the United States. This fate will happen in the United States. And just as a bigger point, globalization was disinflationary for 30 years or more. So if you reverse it, it is inflationary. It also fed growth. And so if you're reversing it, it's going to depress growth. These are the two big points of why you don't want deglobalization. Now, so what you're going to have, inflation is going to be higher in the West, and the United States is particularly vulnerable to this, and lower in the East. So you'll have these two worlds once again.
It's mostly going to impact the US consumer.
A lot of inflation will.
Imported items, but is the dollar going to be taken out of the market? No.
No.
It's going to take probably a few decades before that adjustment comes to an equilibrium anyway.
I think it is.
I think it's less, but there's a couple more points.
Okay.
20, 30 years. To disengage. What do you say, Juan?
No, we're not. We are not.
Sure.
Guys, we have 3 minutes, so let's
Yes,
finish the
it's
presentation.
not a loss of reserve currency as you traditionally think of it. It remains in the West. So the US, Europe, UK, Australia, Japan will use the dollar. The rest of the world will not. And no, it will not take 30 years. It will accelerate in the collective East. So it's a different picture than what you're used to.
Just a commentary as we're brief aside. China and Russia have divested of all their venture capital investments in the United States. And you also, I guess, there was a VC firm that just broke up into U.S., India, and China components. Sequoia, right? So I mean, so you're seeing parts of it already.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you've got to worry about de-dollarization, and as I said, the GDP growth in the East is going to be much higher than in the West. And what does this mean? You should invest in energy and metal commodities. If you think there's a lot of inflation, energy and metal commodities are where you should be. And I would avoid companies in Europe because the economic picture there is just bleak.
Well, not only that, they've shot themselves in the foot again with these ESG requirements on buildings, which is going to cost all kinds of refurbishment and changes to real estate. So, well, we're not talking about that.
The green agenda is also quite destructive.
Yes, right. So, any other questions? One last question.
Yeah, in terms of India, it sounds to me that India is playing both roles, right? It's trying to be friendly with both sides.
Yes.
Is that going to work?
Well, it's doing that, and yes, well, until the U.S. catches on. India is one of the big growth stories in this future scenario.
But this is the same thing that's happened in the 1970s. India was non-aligned. India has fantastic or tremendous capital controls. It's very difficult to export capital from India. There are Indian family offices who made their fortunes here in the United States, went back and bought real estate, made another fortune in Mumbai, Bangalore, whatever, and they can't export any of that capital. So they're just stuck with capital in India that's non-exportable. So they're very strict in the way they approach things, and I'm under the impression that they're going to continue being non-aligned. It's not like the border questions they have with China have gone away.
Well, they're in the whole BRICS.
Hold on. I have a comment on that. The very day that China got Iran and Saudi Arabia to make peace, I was talking to someone who made that exact same point. China and India will never make peace. I said, did you think Iran and Saudi Arabia would? So, oh, no, never. So, but now you're telling me India and China can't? They will make peace because it's financially advantageous. And there's going to be eventually, what we haven't covered here, there's huge amounts of material here. We can't do too much in half now.
Maybe
There's
the
got to
next-
be military. Yes, we can come 52 times.
One of the.
There got to be military alignments in this.
One of the
Better not
conditions asked by the Indian government is to create disengagement on that border dispute. That was in return for India joining BRICS. So this is in the work and it's moving forward. Both of them are optimistic that there will be disengagement. Now, what's the difference between disengagement and peace? It's a thin line. That is finance.
Well,
What's good for both economies, this is what they're gonna do.
I used to teach computer science in the college and the universities. And we were discussing why developments took place. And I always said, money is everything. I started everywhere. And this is why this has happened. So this permeates the world.
Great presentation,
So maybe,
thank you.
yeah, great job.